Hello everyone, this is Adjectives Part 2, and in this video I am going to talk about adjectives that end in ed and ing. These kinds of adjectives usually give students the most trouble, and I think the reason for this confusion is that they look so much like verbs. Many adjectives are formed from verbs, and in this video the ones that we're going to look at are all formed from verbs. And the first two adjectives are going to be confused and confusing. Both of these adjectives are formed from the verb confuse. Look for the definitions underneath each of the adjectives, okay? Now, an adjective that ends in ed, in this case, like confused, is used to describe a feeling or how a person feels or an emotion. Let's look at the example. I am confused by some adjectives. Now we use the ed form here because the person, it's I am, so it's me in this case. I have feelings. I'm feeling confused. And this is really where you're going to see the difference between the ing form. Let's look at that now. And the example is some adjectives are confusing. You see, in this case, we're describing adjectives. And ing adjectives, like confusing, are used to describe the characteristic of a person, a thing, or a situation. So in this sentence, some adjectives are confusing, we're actually describing a characteristic of a thing, or things here, adjectives. And remember, things don't have feelings. Only humans do. And you're going to see this as we go through the rest of the adjectives. Next, we're going to look at frustrated and frustrating. And they are formed from the verb frustrate. In the first example, I am very frustrated when I study adjectives in English. In this case, I feel frustrated when I study adjectives in English. All right, it's a feeling. In the next example, learning adjectives in English can be very frustrating. So what are we doing? We're actually describing a situation, right? The situation doesn't have feelings. So we use the ing form. Next, we're going to look at bored and boring, and they're formed from the verb bore. So in the first example, he was so bored that he fell asleep, right? He was bored. It's a feeling. You're feeling bored, right? You're not interested in something. And in the next example, the movie was boring. You see, we're describing a thing. We're describing the movie, right? The movie doesn't have feelings. So we would never say the movie was bored. Okay, got it? Next, we'll look at interested and interesting. They're both formed from the verb interest. Okay, so the first example, he is interested in buying that car. Again, he's feeling, right? It's a feeling. He can be interested. All right, the car can't be interested, but the human can. In the next example, with the ing, I saw an interesting movie about cats last night. So we're talking about what? The movie, right? We're describing a thing. So we use the ing, right? The movie can't feel interested, okay? The movie is interesting. All right, now we're going to look at terrified and terrifying. And they're formed from the verb terrify. In the first example, I was so terrified by that movie that I couldn't sleep last night. All right, it was a scary movie. I felt terrified. All right, and then in the next example, being in a war is a terrifying experience. In this case, we are describing the experience of being in a war. So this is why we use the ing, right? We're describing the experience, a thing, okay? Next, we have disappointed and disappointing, and these are formed from the verb disappoint. In the first example, he was disappointed by his bad grade on his math test, so he felt disappointed. It's a feeling. And in the next example, the team had a very disappointing season. So what are we doing? We're describing the thing, the season, right? That's why we use the ing. All right. In the next two, we're going to look at tired and tiring, and they're formed from the verb tire. So in the first example, they were really tired after traveling all day. They felt tired. They traveled all day. They felt tired. And in the next example, she has to stand up all day on her job. It is very tiring. So we're describing the situation of standing up all day on her job, right? So we're describing a thing, and that's why we use the ing. Okay. Next, we have amazed and amazing, and they're formed from the verb amaze. And in the first example, the people in the audience were amazed by the magician's tricks. So they were feeling amazed by the tricks. Okay, they were amazing tricks. And in the next example, it's amazing how he can run so fast. So in this case, we're describing how the person runs fast, a situation. So we use the ing. Okay? Next we have excited and exciting. And they are formed from the verb excite. So in the first example, she was very excited because it was her birthday. So she felt excited because of her birthday. And in the next example, that basketball game last night was very exciting. And we are describing a thing. We are describing the basketball game. And that's why we use the ing. Okay? Next, we're going to look at the adjectives annoyed and annoying. And they're formed from the verb annoy. So in the first example, she was annoyed by all of the road construction in her neighborhood. She felt annoyed about the road construction. Okay, it's a feeling. Next example, that loud noise is very annoying. You see, we're describing the noise, all right, not feelings. We're describing the noise. Okay. And next we have the two adjectives relaxed and relaxing, which are formed from the verb relax. So in the first example, I was very relaxed after I took a hot bath. So I was feeling relaxed after I took the bath. It's a feeling. And in the next example, watching the waves hit the beach was really relaxing. So what am I doing? I'm describing a situation of watching the waves hit the beach. The waves come in. All right, so I'm describing the situation. All right, okay. Next, we're going to look at the adjectives amused and amusing, and they are formed from the verb amuse. Basically, it means to be entertained. Okay, so I was amused by the way the kittens were playing. So I felt amused. I was entertained by the way the kittens were playing. And in the next example, it was amusing to hear his father tell the story. So what are we describing? We're describing the situation of his father telling the story, right? That's why we use the ing, right? We're describing a situation, a thing. And our last two adjectives in the video are going to be satisfied and satisfying, and they come from the verb satisfy. And in the first example, I was very satisfied with the meal she cooked last night. I felt satisfied. Okay, it met my expectations. All right, and in the next example, she cooked a satisfying meal last night. What are we describing here? We're describing the meal. All right, the meal doesn't have feelings. All right, that's all for this video. You can read this example here. I'll give you a pretty good idea of what we just did. Just remember, the ED is for personal feelings, and the ING is describing something or someone. Great work, everyone. Remember what I always say, keep practicing. See you next time.